Hey, Molly,
Hello. Good.
how
How
are
are
you?
you? Very good. How are you
Oh,
doing?
I'm all amped up today, so I'm hoping that we're gonna have a lot of stuff to go through because I'm in that, you know, ready to go mode. It's
Well, we
funny, I
can
had my
definitely talk about the travel stuff. That'd be
yeah, it's an interesting one. Like this is one of my favorite ways to come at marketing on Facebook.
fun.
Um, it's elegant. I like elegant solutions. That's just like I'm
Yeah.
always looking for that. It's like this
Yeah.
long journey for optimal.
And I like the way you could do the sub niching and helping clients do that.
Right.
Uh, my customers do that. That would be good.
Yeah, if you can show somebody a model and just say, hey, this works, right? This
Hmm.
is how it works. Here's how it works in broad terms. Here's how it works as it scales down, as it scales up, and it's congruent and it makes sense. I love
Yeah.
that. It's what
I
I
love
don't.
that too.
I'm always looking for where something fails. Like where is this going to break, and intellectually break. And most of the time, things do. If it's straight to offer and the market size is,
Hmm.
I don't know, say 1,000 people. Well, at some point you've run out of people, right?
Right.
It breaks. Scale breaks it. But other things, it doesn't. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Now you're not going MFA live, right? Did I see that post?
Yeah, I can't go. This is so critical right now that I get this done and market and get my numbers done and actually get things moving. It's been a really long, hard road getting here. So
I hear you.
I can't spend with travel. It's almost 7 days, and it was just too much. I just couldn't justify it.
Yeah, it's funny. I did this whole thinking exercise myself, so I went back and forth. There's so much to do. I'm like, you know what? I'm going, and I was totally excited about it, and am excited about it. And then that morning, I made my decision. I was committed to it. Felt great. And about 3 hours later, a new client I'm on the East Coast. He's in Los Angeles. We're on the phone. He said, you know what? I need you to come out for 4 days. And we're just going to go through all this stuff. And I look at the calendar and I leave Friday. I get back Wednesday, and then I get on a plane to MFA Live Thursday.
Wow. That'll be a lot of travel. That'll be good.
And I hate flying.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike, what's happening?
Oh, just came in from the woods.
Nice.
Yeah, you're growing the beard again.
Winter.
Winter. Is it? You have snow already, I guess, huh?
No, but we have our fall trail race, and I have 11 kilometers of trail to clear, and I dropped a tree on my head, and it hurts.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
5 out of 10 loggers recommend that you not do that. I think it's right on. There's actually a little stick figure right on your chainsaw case, a little plastic thing with a tree in the guy's head and like the circle in the thing. Like, don't do this. Right.
Yeah, like even the smallest of hard hats would have helped. It was just a little tree, but it fucking hurts.
That's a good time. It's the little tree. Every logger will tell you the little trees are the ones that kill you. Yeah, it's the little.
Yeah, and I knew this wasn't. Yeah, they. All
right.
Those are the ones. This wasn't one of those deals. It was just like a whole bunch of stuff. I was like, and this little thing is going bonk. It was more like the little twig, I think, that hit me too. That's
ow.
Just punctured my brain just a little bit.
Yeah, right. Just a small flesh wound, right? Yeah, you'll be fine. If you start twitching in the background, we'll know what's up.
Yeah, yeah. Fred and Willie were with me.
We'll give everybody a few minutes to jump on. What's new in Mike Land these days?
I have a question for you today. I've got it's not a great question, but I've got a client. He's awesome. He's 72 years old, retired anesthesiologist, pain management doctor, and he created this awesome program that instructs people on opioid use. So the difference between tolerance, dependence, and addiction. So we ran some Facebook ads to people with chronic pain and interest in opioids, and nothing happened. Then we're offering a $9 a review program. So you get the whole suite, so the videos, the MP3, and the book. for $9, and we return that $9 to you once you give us a review. And nothing.
Is that working? Oh.
No. So then we started a Facebook page, and I'm trying to get Facebook likes and some conversation going there. And what we're finding is people with pain have three things. One, they just want to get rid of the pain, and this instruction doesn't help that. One, they want their doctor to give them stronger medications, and this doesn't do that. And three, they just like wearing their pain as a badge, like they like, oh, I'm in pain all the time.
Right.
Love me. So, I'm like, so we're not getting in front in front of people for an interest sake. And I didn't know is there any way to see if anybody's searching for that sort of thing on Google or?
Yeah, I mean, people will. I mean, this is the example you hear all the time on AdWords, right? It's basically, somebody is sitting in their office chair with a toothache, and they're searching for like how to get rid of a toothache because they've got money in hand and they'll spend it to get rid of that toothache. Now, of course, they'll spend it at their dentist, so it's not a great example. Pain management, super, super expensive on AdWords. There's just money to be made there. So if somebody's literally in pain, there's money to be made. It's a very competitive.
See, the problem is this doesn't solve any problem. It just educates.
Yeah. See, I mean, I guess the question I would ask you is when you just got whacked on the head by the tree, were you looking for a pamphlet on how to avoid the pain of getting whacked on the head by a tree? No, you want Advil and you want the pain to go away, right? I mean, you don't.
No, I get that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
problem is, but as you know, like opioids, especially in your neighborhood, like opioids are a bad thing now, right? Like they're running rampant. And so our actually target, I think, is more towards legislatures and board doctors to try to get, it's a really comprehensive program, and doctors should be recommending or mandating that their patients go through this program before receiving the opioid medications. So that's actually a better use for it. Because like you said, people aren't looking for, oh, I wonder if I'm addicted or dependent. Like if they're addicted, they don't care.
Exactly. Right. Well, I mean, then it's just a targeting issue, right? Targeting and messaging. I mean, who is the actual buyer here? Who is likely to spend the cash? If that's a doctor who can recommend the program, I mean, ideally the doctor, you give them 50, 80, 90% of the sale so that they recommend the program and that you have some sort of back end associated with it. But the medical stuff gets anything with pain, anything with it's a nightmare to deal with Google, to deal with Facebook about. I mean, Facebook in particular, as you know, anytime you're pointing out negative, you get a red flag in Facebook. Hey, are you in pain? It's bullseye. I don't know. It's tough. That's a tough one, man. I don't know. I'm not sure how I would approach that. I mean, there are a couple ways you could come at it sideways, like when somebody is in pain, like what are those people also interested in? Like what's also going on in their life at that point? So you come at it sideways where you're like, well, you're over here looking at this, and I know you're looking at that because you're interested in, because you've got this going on in your life. So let me show you this other thing you should be aware of too. I like the sideways plays myself. I like those a lot.
Because it's an education, like if we're not teaching, like if you've got chronic pain, chronic back pain, whatever, chronic cancer pain, whatever, reading this document is not going to help you relieve that pain at all. It's just going to help you not understand that you're like a lot of the older patients are afraid they're addicted because, they forgot their medication. And then, this morning they had a headache, like, oh, I need my drugs. I need my fix. And so, it helps that. And then it helps like loved ones. Like if you were on opioids and I loved you and I'm like, oh, I'm really worried that Sean's going to become addicted. Right. I would get that. So I could help you not become addicted. But like the target is so small, and because it's an education piece, people don't want to learn stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a top 100 thing somebody wants to learn about. Limited time, energy, and dollars to say, oh, what is it today? Am I going to learn how to meditate and broaden my mind and get all the benefits of 3,000 years of wisdom, or am I going to learn how to head off an opiate addiction? I think I might buy Headspace. I know. It's a tough one. That's a tough sell.
Because he's not like he's a retired pain management. And he doesn't need the $47. Like, I don't think he's trying to build a second fortune. I just think he's trying to leave some sort of legacy.
Well, if that's what he really wants to do, then make it free, right? Put it out there and, sort of take the Tim Ferriss approach, which is, Tim Ferriss made his money on his books and in his investing. And he now has a platform where he gives away tons of really good content for free. It bills that he also has advertising, and yes, he's making money, but I think in the absence of all advertising, he would probably still do what he does. So he doesn't have to make, I don't know the guy, from what I can see, I don't think he has to make any money doing it, but he's certainly leaving a legacy for himself. So if that's the goal, just do that. Don't try to wrap it in something else. Do a free site with great content. I guess the question this guy, I assume it's a man, if there's a woman that needs to figure out is like, what's their unique contribution to the world? Like, is he uniquely qualified to answer? And when he unpeels the layers of that and whatever's left, that kernel, then you just have to figure out how to get it out there. And if he needs to make money, some things you have to sell or people don't give any credit to it, right? And if I took every bit of my knowledge and just put it out in a blog, where every day I just wrote 3 pages of something that I learned in a lifetime, and you found it, you stumbled on it, and it was good, wouldn't take you long before you'd think, well, this isn't that great. It's free, right? But if I took that same content and wrapped it up in a $5,000 program, you would immediately think it must be worth way more. It's perception. So it's challenging it's challenging. Perception is reality in many senses. The example I use for that is, I still laugh at myself. So there's a company in Finland called Four Sigmatic. Interesting company. They sell mushroom coffee. All right. So you're going to get a glimpse into how crazy I am. And that was actually a Tim Ferriss podcast sponsor. So Tim Ferriss gets on this company. They make coffee out of chaga mushroom, which is a great I think it's an antioxidant. So incredibly healthy mushroom, and lion's mane, which is nootropic. So Tim Ferriss talks about, he does a little blurb about mushroom coffee and about how amazing it is. And he drank half a cup and he was on fire and not jittery all day, total cognitive powerhouse. Okay. He's pushed every button I've got now, right? I love coffee, cognitive, just nootropics. I'm like, you've got me, man. I'm there. I go in, I use this code, I order. And before I do that, I'm like, I don't love mushrooms. I don't dislike mushrooms, but I don't love mushrooms. I do love coffee. And I look through the reviews and I spot check 30, just random. And all of those 30 reviews, everyone's like, it's amazing. It doesn't taste like mushrooms at all. It tastes just like coffee. Right? I'm like, you know what? All right. This pushes me over the edge. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. I order, I don't know, way too much. I make my first cup. You want to know what mushroom coffee tastes like? It tastes exactly like mushrooms. Exactly like mushrooms, right? And I'm drinking this cup of coffee in complete disbelief. I'm like, how can this taste so much like mushrooms? I'm like, well, because it's made out of mushrooms, right? Like, what did I think was going to happen in mushroom coffee? It's insanity. So, perception is reality. If I said to you, I bet I could sell a product called mushroom coffee and get people who were buying it to believe it doesn't taste like mushrooms at all, and I simultaneously was selling that it's 2 types of mushroom. That's all it's made from is mushrooms. You'd be like, no, you can't. But, yeah, it's ridiculous. But yet here I am as a consumer, absolutely just, in love with the idea, and I can't wait to make my first cup. And now I've somehow, after like 30 cups, convinced myself it really doesn't taste like mushrooms. It just tastes like it's insanity. And this was actually, this is a funny segue, an unintentional segue. I made a list of stuff to talk about today that I thought might be of interest, of just random things I've encountered lately. But one of them I put under the headline of, be wary of the noise. And it's interesting, and maybe you're unaffected by this, but I see this stuff, and there's an interesting, I'll use an example. I see this thing in my Facebook feed a lot now, and I try to avoid Facebook as much as possible. It's just like, I don't know, depression and angst whenever I look at Facebook. But there's this guy, and it's how I built a $100,000 a month consulting business with one single funnel, right? Well, here's the reality. Anybody selling how to make $100,000 a month consulting funnel has never made $100,000 a month consulting. I mean, that's reality. Yet, what happens is in the back of your mind now, there's this little cognitive kind of itch, little irritant. Like, really? Is somebody really making $100,000? Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what would that look like? What is that? And then you realize, so then you carry that around with you for a while. And you see it all over the place. It's interesting. The noise is everywhere. I think about Richard Koch and the 80-20 stuff. Like, if you go down the rabbit hole of 80-20, you wake up basically every day feeling that you're just not smart, because you're like, if I just could figure out the 5% of my activities that generate 95% of my revenue, I could sunshine and unicorns. Well, the reality of 80-20 is that it applies to large groups, to a large sample size. So if I look at my business this year and do an 80-20 analysis, 20% of my clients don't generate 80% of my profits. It doesn't work. Now, if I look at my business over 17 years, it gets a lot closer. My sample size is a lot better, and the math starts to make sense. So, for those of us who get 20 as an example, you get this kind of like, wow, I'm doing something wrong, or I could be doing it better, or there's another way, and I'm the only one who doesn't know. Nonsense. You both know what there is to know. It's weird. It's a funny phenomenon. So my new litmus test is when I start feeling a sense of very minor angst about not doing something, that's my first warning sign. I'm like, this probably isn't good for me. Mushroom coffee aside, that's probably very good for me. But, if I see somebody selling something and I think because of that it's making me wrong or incomplete or whatever, it's a big red flag to know, what, there's something going on here. That's just add that to your thinking. I've got a whole list of stuff here we'll go through just for fun. I like to bring you guys into my world of craziness. I'll save a cool question for last, and these are just some observations I've made in the last few weeks since we last talked, and why I think they're important and why you might want to think about them. One of them is great for Mike because Mike is actually, I'll save the one for Mike while he just ran off looking for his moment. Actually, I'll wait till Mike comes back because I'm worried he has a head injury. I just want to make sure he's okay.
Yeah.
We'll all hold our collective breath. Make sure he's not having a seizure.
Come on, Mike.
Safety first, Mike.
He's gonna have to start wearing a hard hat.
We should. I have a chainsaw helmet I can bring to MFA Live.
That's the thing. I've got one. I just don't wear it.
Yeah, I have a rule about that. My neighbor is a logger. He cut down some trees for me and ended up going to the emergency room. And I realized, if my logger neighbor cutting down trees goes to the ER, I'm going to wear my helmet all the time.
Well, I go through stuff. My friend's dad died.
Wow. Head injury.
Doing it. He didn't really tell me what happened, but like Sean said, it's when you're cutting down the big, scary, dangerous tree, you're taking all the precautions, and when you're cutting down the easy ones, those are the ones that sneak up on you and surprise you. It's always when you're not thinking about it that you think you're safe is when you're in the most trouble.
Exactly.
So
this is a thought for you, Mike. This is, and I'm sure you've picked up on this before. I was thinking this the other day that I don't know, and there have only two of them on the call, so I'm not trying to get rid of competition here or anything, but running a traffic agency is hard for a million reasons that everybody knows. But one of the things that's interesting about it, I have a new client who I'm going out to see for 4 days in LA, and I know who all of his service providers are. He has a big team, and I know kind of what they all get paid because a lot of them just publish like how they get paid. And how I get paid is not the same because out of all of them, I'm the only one that is crystal clear how much money I make or I cost, right? Everybody else, like there's a team it's a tech team. And I mean, that's like $6,000 a month, right? You write the check because without them, you don't have anything. And it's a retainer. And if you use the time, you use the time. If you don't, you don't. If he doesn't make a dime in a month, he still writes the check for $6,000. They're there. He needs the assets. Changes have to be made, whatever. Well, me, if I come in and let's say that I want, you know, what's fair is fair. I want $6,000 too, right? Well, my $6,000 gets bolted on to figures that generate things like cost per lead. So all of a sudden, I kind of have to sing from my supper all of a sudden. So it's interesting that I don't know. I mean, I would still do traffic because I like the traffic side of the equation a lot. But I think if I were smarter and I had a choice, I'd stay on the conversion side of the aisle a little bit more on the build things outside because it's harder to tie. I mean, traffic, you just kind of, that's the fuel for the engine, but you have to have the engine no matter what. So you can kind of get paid for that. But on the traffic side, it's really easy to look at somebody like me and say, oh, he's not as good as this guy over here. Let's keep going through the traffic people till we find the one that's, you know, can actually make the numbers work. So it's interesting. It's an interesting way. I don't know why. I just thought that was kind of a fascinating. Now, if you're on the client side, I think the way around this is to amortize all of your costs, not just look at traffic as cost per lead. And if you, let's say you have, the math, I'm going to get funky here, but if you had 1,000 visitors to your site and it cost you $1,000 for an agency to do just your site itself updates, just to keep things running, I would add $1 cost per, I would add $1 at least as a cost per lead to the first 1,000 or something. I'm not getting the math right, but I would want to amortize that cost. I wouldn't want to just amortize the traffic, right? Which is kind of how it happened. It's interesting, something interesting to think about. I'm going to go through 4 different things we did in the last month that I thought were interesting very quickly, just to see if it resonates with any of you. So one was, this is a new client, has a big list. Sold a digital product at $297, dropped the price to $97. Was going to do a price increase back to $297. Very much worth. It's a great product. And we just did an Infusionsoft export of prospects who didn't convert, and then turned them into a Facebook custom audience and did a 10-day countdown. And it was great. It was a great little campaign, kind of low effort. Didn't need to do a lot of creative. The messaging only changed, I think, twice. There's, whatever offer. The first messaging was offer expires on September 30th. Second message was 3 days left. Last message was 1 day left, expires at midnight. Pretty low barrier to actually do that. You just, I can't remember what the audience size was, 40-something thousand. But it was a nice way to capture some money that most likely wouldn't have been captured. Right. I mean, if you were a prospect who didn't buy when the price at 97, when the price went to 297, you probably weren't going to buy. Right. This had been months and people had been leads. So to monetize that list kind of felt like free money, like to take that group and say, listen, you didn't buy it the first time at 97. In 10 days, it's going to be 297. It's not going back. If you want it, now's the time. And I don't know how it was. Tens of thousands of dollars extracted. So it was interesting play, something to think about. Not rocket science, but kind of cool. Same client has an in-person event. We took his entire list and created a custom audience. Everybody who hadn't signed up for this in-person event. But what we did, I thought this made, we do this all the time, and I thought I have some evidence that it works on Facebook as well as it works in AdWords. What we did is we segmented that list by geography so that that I think more than half of the ad budget was spent in the state in which the event was held. It was super easy, pretty much driving distance in that state. And then the rest of the budget was everybody else. And 50% of the sales for this event came from the state in which it is held. And then the other 50% everywhere else. Makes perfect sense. You know, I mean, there's no surprise in it. We do this all the time with AdWords. We do sort of circles with geography. But I think this has broad applications. I think there's something, if you have any kind of physicality in your business, if you list an address, or if you reference a region that you're in, I do think you should think about segmenting your audience so that your wheelhouse is separate. Like if somebody, I mean, for whatever reason, if you look and you're like, oh, no way, that person's, you know, for me, if somebody's in New England and I see, I just have a greater affinity. No, it makes no sense. It's emotional, not logical. So I think there would be value in targeting, if you have any physicality, I mean, if it's a physical store, this is obvious, but even if it's a non-physical entity, or if it's like a retreat or an event or something like that, the geography it does make a difference. We see it all the time. Next item on the list, we have a client that has a different client has a product in a very traditional VSL format, exactly what you would expect. Upsell this, upsell that, in 12-minute VSL. You can't believe the benefits. Google shut it down. Facebook didn't, but was about to. Just didn't work. And we moved the product and we set up a site in WordPress and we set up WooCommerce and did straight up e-commerce, and it's perfectly okay. Like these are, sometimes, you know, I wrote down in parentheses, sometimes conventional is okay. Like sometimes, you know, we're all very smart, direct marketers, we know the right way to do things, but sometimes you can't do the things you want to do that way. And rather than throw up our hands and, you know, I was tempted to go back to this client and say, you know what, we just can't, you know, we can't do it this way. Like Google just shut down his account, hates what he was doing. I got on the phone with our rep and they're like, no, we're not, absolutely not, no. And you know, so I went back and said, well, what if we did it this way? And I go, that's fine. Yeah, but it was kind of like, that's fine, comma, but you'll never do it that way. And we rebuilt the whole thing and showed it to the account rep, and the account rep, that's perfectly okay, right? So it's kind of like, you know, the lesson in this is, you know, do you want to do something perfectly by direct marketing principles and lose out on 80% of the available traffic? Or do you want to do it less perfectly and have access to that 80% of traffic? It's just a numbers question. Who knows? Last one, and this will be a good segue into your conversation, Melanie, because this is interesting to me. I call it's sideways marketing. Probably somebody coined that term. I'm sure they did. It's not my term. There's a story behind this, though, which I'll tell you briefly, and then it's applicable to Melanie and her situation. I think we can segue into a conversation about that if it's helpful. So several years ago, I had a prospective client I really wanted to work with, and it was one of those situations. It was a weird situation. We're having lunch. I wanted to meet this person for a long time, having a great lunch, and we're just going. So as we're talking, I see this entire strategy in my mind appear. That's how it usually works for me. Like I see, I've done this for a long time, so I see all the components, and I realize that the strategy I'm seeing is something I observed in another website, right? So the website is called Chalkboard Magazine. I think it's thechalkboardmag.com. Chalkboard Mag is a lifestyle site that is geared toward, I would say 25 to 45, maybe a little older, maybe different segments, primarily women who are interested in health, so yoga, superfoods, on and on and on, and juicing. See juicing all over it. Well, Chalkboard Magazine is a product of a company called Press Juicery. It's a company out, I think they're in Los Angeles, I know they're in California. You're not going to be surprised to hear this, Press Juicery makes pressed juice, right? That's their thing. But it's not obvious. when you're on Chalkboard Magazine, I mean, they have like guest editors like Kate Hudson. I mean, this is a very serious site. So I have this conversation with a client, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And basically what I'm telling him is, you need to do this strategy that Press Juicery has done with the Chalkboard Magazine. And I walk him through the entire strategy. The only problem with this conversation, and I just realized this call is recorded, the only problem with this conversation is I didn't know that for a fact. I had inferred that, just sort of seeing a few pieces, and it's kind of like, I think this is what they're doing. Because it's not obvious. It's not like there are ads embedded on it, buy our juice. Very subtle and very in keeping with good content, just interesting articles. So I came back from that meeting on fire and intellectually. I'm like, this is such a great idea. I want to do this. I love it. But then I realized, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know if that was true, right? I just inferred from a few data points, like this is what they were doing and why. And then I realized that the business owner, his business partner, happens to be his daughter, who was young and savvy, and I'm sure familiar with Chalkboard Magazine. And I had this moment where I'm like, oh no. If I just laid out this entire strategy, and it's like a Jenga or a house of cards where one thread gets pulled and there's no there. And what was really, really interesting, and I'm talking about 1 in a billion chance, when I got home that afternoon, I was in the office, I'm thinking about it, and I did some research, and there is like a feature-length article written about Chalkboard Magazine and how Press Juicery did exactly what I was describing in the conversation. I'd never seen the article, right? So it's this weird, like, I mean, if either of you had seen the site, when you go look at it, you'll know exactly. It wasn't rocket science what I was doing. I was just inferring from a couple of data points, like, oh, okay, this is why this would make sense, like working backwards from why they would do that. So it wasn't genius. It was just interesting. Like, it's interesting to see. And what I like about it, and this is a segue into for Melody, into your project, that sometimes what we're selling, people are not immediately interested in buying. We had a client in the yoga space for a long time, and they had something that was free, like literally free, that you could go in, you could set up an account where you could post, you could have like make a little tribe for your yoga studio and add users and manage users. And if they bought like the outfit you were wearing, that you would get 10%. And I mean, it was unbelievable, and it was free. And if we tried to give that away directly to that market, we got nowhere. They were like, wait a minute, what, you want me to take advantage? I mean, it was weird. It was like, you're marketing to me? No marketing in yoga, right? It was odd. But when we put up content that was, that resonated with the yoga market, which was a lot of imagery and kind of cool photography with different poses and some video, like why we love yoga stuff. And the response was like 1,000-fold. And then when we did put the offers in after that, and they weren't really offers, it was more like describing how they could boost their practice with this tool, it was perfectly okay. Perfectly okay. But to try to do it up front, it was a nightmare. I mean, I was looking at, there was one segment of the market, you know, the cost per lead was like $60-something for a product that's free. And then when we did, when we switched over to the it's sort of it was a like campaign. It's fascinating, the logistics of it, but you know, cost per lead was like 11 cents. It was crazy. It was just ridiculous, because it shouldn't be hard to give away free. I mean, it really shouldn't be that hard. So what this reminds me of, and this is, I think, from a strategic perspective, something for both of you to add to your toolkits, is that oftentimes, instead of saying, here, I think you need X, or I think you might be interested in X, and X is something that either it requires some effort from their part, maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a $7, you know, whatever, self-liquidating offer, tripwire, whatever they're called. That's an easy thing to say no to, and once you've said no to it, you've said no to it. So you kind of get a bite at the apple. which is, maybe you get 3, maybe you show them 3 times. But when you come at it adjacent to that and you say, well, people who would be interested in what I'm selling would also be interested in, like by definition, would also be interested in this other thing. So why don't I build the audience with the other thing that I know will indicate that they're interested in my thing, and then embed my thing, my juice, in one example, into the other thing, which is a feature-length article about superfoods and how to make your life better, right? So the example from Melanie, which I thought was interesting, and when I come up with an idea, the first thing I do, and my background is in defense and intelligence, we used to do is called red teaming. So a red team is the team that looks at the conventional assessment of something and tries to figure out where it's horribly wrong. And it often is horribly, horribly wrong. So when I red team myself, which is kind of weird, I'm like, oh, I love this idea. Well, the first shot at red teaming me is one of my employees, either Andy or Zoe. So I will come in with an idea, oh, here we go. And then their job is to say, no, it doesn't make any sense. If I pass that gate, then I red team myself, which I look at and say, okay, where does this break? Where does this idea break? So for Melanie, I thought it was interesting. Like you sort of pick a potential segment where if you want to be able to sell something to people who are interested in travel, then you have a couple of ways you can do it. You can find them on Facebook and figure out, oh, these people are interested in travel, and say, hey, would you like to buy this thing because it's related to travel? And then you get a yes or a no. It's binary. Like, I don't need that. What I like instead is when you say, well, wait a minute. If the people who would be interested in this are interested in travel, why don't I show them things that people who are interested in travel are interested in, and really do it right? So if it's pretty pictures and sandy beaches, not my favorite kind of travel, but if that's your thing, and it's top 5 must-see spots in, well, I'll use the example that I used earlier, Melanie, because I like this example better, where if I want to try, if I'm interested, if I've spent a long time traveling to Japan, and I know what there is to know about what you should see and where you should go and what you need to be aware of, as an American who's traveled to Japan, then I could come up with a lot of really good content. And that content could speak to people who are like me, maybe not Japanese, who want to travel to Japan. They want to make sure they've seen the things they should see. They want to find the out of the way places. They want to know how to get around. There are all kinds of stuff that they want to know, they'd be interested in, that would excite them, that they could get their mindset really into the travel side of things and really kind of prime them on that. And then to embed in that somewhere at the end, or as a link, or a million ways to test this, in there a way to get the product that you're selling that is related, that this audience might be interested in. So I think one of the examples I saw with you, Melanie, is the like how to take better travel photos. So if someone puts, I'm just thinking, and I don't travel a lot anymore until next week apparently, but if someone came to me and said, hey, you want to take better travel photos, and I'm not in travel mode. I'm just not. I'm looking at Facebook. I'm doing a million things. I'm like, it's sure. I'd love to. I don't have time to invest in this. Skip right by it. And then eventually, I sort of get banner blindness to it. Like I see, it's the $100,000 a month funnel guy. And that does. I'm not blind to it. That just irritates me. But that's where this is one of those things where you just stop seeing the offer. It's like, oh yeah, I don't need to think about that. But if I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed and there's this picture of like some crazy Japanese forest and the mist and the, scene right out of The Last Samurai, and it's, whatever, thinking about traveling to Japan, 5 things you need to know. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And I click on it. And now I'm in travel mode. My brain is around. I'm like, oh, I love this. And I might, at that point, engage with somebody. I would just show content initially and just have someone look at that and I'm like, wow, the writing's good, the imagery is great. It's, oh wow, this site's all about traveling to Japan. I'm not traveling to Japan anytime soon, but it's on my list, right? So maybe you click like, it doesn't really matter if you do or not, because you're going to get retargeted anyway. Just more content. We're going to show you some more things. We're going to bring you back, because the idea is that because you're interested in that the things that are being sold by the advertiser are by definition interesting to you at a much higher rate. And this approach changes all the economics, because if you make it inexpensive to advertise on the front end, and you get multiple bites at the apple, Mike knows all this stuff, I'm not telling him, he doesn't know, then it's a big win. Because your cost per lead at the end of the day it's the roughest number. It's ROI is the king, but you don't get ROI without a lead, without a sale. It's pretty hard to get there. So unless you have a donate button, which let me know how that's going. So lead's the big hurdle. And if it costs you $7 to get a lead and a different strategy makes it 25 cents, well, wow, and 25 cents over time, and you're reaching this audience over and over, and you encourage the audience to do some social sharing because the content's good. Where I think this goes wrong, where I see it go wrong a lot, is everyone's like, oh yeah, content. We have to have some content. And you read the content, and you're like, this is awful. Yeah, just awful. And immediately you've done more harm than good. Like, I'll never go back there. The typos, the imagery was terrible. It was, picture from someplace in China, not Japan. It was terrible. Now you've done way more harm. So the hours spent on the front end, even if you only did 10, 12, 15 really high quality pieces of content that just kind of covered all your bases, and that's it. Well, that's a lot. 10's a lot. 5's a lot. I mean, if it's good and you have your offers in it, you can use that all day long. Now, again, this is where we get to this point of, well, shouldn't you send them straight to a squeeze page and make them sign up and all this? From a principle perspective, yes. Like, is that what, if we could do that? Yes. However, from an economic perspective, I think the answer is probably no. Particularly on Facebook, where you can exhaust an audience over time. I mean, the Facebook audience and Google AdWords audience are kind of different in that the AdWords audience kind of refreshes itself every day, it seems. So tomorrow, everybody who's searching for knee pain relief either didn't get a solution when they searched yesterday, or they're new in the knee pain market. Like, all of a sudden the knee hurts today, they need a solution. Tomorrow, there are going to be new people in the knee pain market, and there are going to be people with failed solutions that are coming back. They're looking for something new. So your prospect pool kind of refreshes itself. Facebook is different in that if you go find an audience of just say a market segment about 500,000 people, nice, easy number to work with, and you put an offer in front of that market for 2 or 3 months, at some point you're going to have exhausted that market to that offer. It's not going to, relevance is going to go down. It's just not going to happen at that point. So I like strategies that allow somebody to go back into a market over and over and over with kind of a new take, new approach, new products without, let's say you're doing the travel thing and you have 5 different things you could show. You can do that. I mean, you can do that a long time because you're not exhausting that audience. They're not tired. So if they're interested in traveling to Japan, they're not tired of seeing stuff about it. They're not needing to avoid it. They're probably looking forward to it. It's a nice distraction. Give them something to get into, and that's I don't know. It's elegant. I mentioned this before. I like solutions that are elegant. So questions, reaction, just things. We're all professionals here. So I hear my own voice for a little too long, but love to hear thoughts on that, or feedback or pushback if you disagree. And to be clear, there are a lot of people out there like, you're stupid if you're not doing straight to offer. It's all straight to offer all day long. I respect them.
Yeah. So I have a kind of a magazine site that's been developed for all the different areas of interest. So for dating, travel, but they're all together. It's like for people over 55, but they're the types of things that they're interested in.
Nice.
Trying to become like an authority site. So instead of doing a specific website, could that work? You know, if we had that content in there, could it work from there instead of doing a specific website for each area?
Good question. I like specificity. I don't always like specificity. I guess it's really what's the market you're going after, and is it something that somebody will feel like there's a lot more there when they get to it, or if they feel like, oh, this is kind of what I'm interested in, but there's a lot here I'm not. What I think is revolutionary about Facebook, when you hyper target, hyper segment, you know so much about the audience that it's unfair. I mean, they're not seeing the ad unless they've met all these criteria. So because you know that, I like to sort of use that to my advantage. Like, wow, I really know based on your profile, you are way into, travel to this particular area. So I'm only going to show you that. I'm going to send you to a place where everything there makes you feel like you found the place for travel to that area. Like, that's it. That's all there is, and get you excited about it, so that I am a specialist in a world of generalists, if that makes sense. Can I answer your question, or did I come at it wrong?
No, yeah, you did. So basically you would have like sub-sites based on sub niches, like a whole bunch of them. Kind of, right?
Yeah, I know enough about how your product will eventually be monetized to know that a lot of the play is in the end customers continually being able to niche down.
Yeah.
Right? Lots of criteria.
Exactly. That's the key. I wouldn't do that. I just need to prove the numbers.
Right.
And then I help teach them how to do that. That's exactly the play.
Yeah, to give yourself the advantage, I would niche down, because you'll get a much better response. If we can hyper target to a niche, we can get a better response. To say, it's almost like, here's an example. We just chose one that you're interested. Let's say you're interested in, I don't know, Pacific Northwest, and it's Northern California and Seattle, and whatever. I mean, you can do it, and if you've traveled there a lot, and you've got you might have some links over to, Gear Patrol is a great site that does a lot of good stuff like this, and maybe you put some of their stuff on, and things to do, and go to Filson, and all this kind of, like, you just become the person who, I feel like if I had to recommend a friend, I would recommend you. If someone came, this is my litmus test all the time. If somebody came to me and said, hey, who should I talk to? Or who do you know who can tell me, everything there is to know about traveling the Pacific Northwest? Like, oh, you should talk to Melanie. She travels there all the time. It's whatever you need to know. She's the one to talk to.
Well, okay, go see that link right there. Go look at that link.
Pulling that up right here.
Just see if, because you would, from Facebook, you would drive them into the specific area. I'm just thinking, I don't know.
No, I like this. I mean, I do like this a lot. It's general.
So, yeah. It's magazine style, kind of.
It's a nice magazine. I would tighten up I would narrow the width, just because it's scaling in width, and it just makes it harder to read. I like to do that sort of narrow, make it, especially these are, if you think about your target audience, they're used to reading in columns too. So I would definitely do it. I think I know which theme you're using. It's a great theme. It's
responsive, so if you narrow your browser, it narrows up automatically.
Yeah, it's good. It should start narrow. Sorry. I used to work for a magazine, so I get wound up. I read so much that if anything challenges my reading joy, I go mental about it. So
yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
This is good. This is very good. At a high level, I think this is outstanding. I would never send anybody to the homepage, obviously, because it's over.
Right.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, just a specific blog. So that good content, you would send them to that, and then within that, we would have then maybe the ad or a link to something that was a product.
And the way I would do this, I think, is I would use, like I would have this site, and then I would use categories, and I would use the categories to be a way to niche down by segment. Even if you as the advertiser are doing all the segmentation and you're trying to reach 5 or 10 different segments of the marketplace, I would use categories to do that so that you could send somebody effectively to home pages within the site that were relevant to a subset of this traffic. So if
Right.
I don't,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, so you've got like budgeting, investing, frugal living. You've got lots of things where you can say, okay, this is a category, and how, then you can target by category. Because this is sort of what I'm thinking. If you target on the front end, thinking you're reaching an audience that's interested in like minimal living and frugal living, and whatever, then like that's the market. Then I would want to have a place where I could not only send them to individual content, but I could retarget them through that content within the same sort of drilled down topic areas. So retarget them with more and more and more about that topic before I try to move them elsewhere. And I would probably, I might want to have a category page at some point.
Yeah.
Go to
instead of saying blog, maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, you can you have the infrastructure to do it. I mean, you can. I think just adding the categories makes it all work. Which I've done. The reason I mentioned this, I've done a project like this.
Okay. So all those things under blog are actually categories. Should I call it a category instead of a blog?
Okay. No, as long as you have the tools. That wasn't obvious to me. Because what you want to do is you want to have at some point. I'm sure this is going to look exactly like what I had in my mind. Yes, this is exactly what I was thinking. Right? So, frugal living category is probably where, at some point, I like to have a general play, which is you're not sending them to anything specific in the ad. You're starting out with a very general, like frugal living, where to start, and
yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, well, this is all about frugal living, and it's all right. Yeah, this is cool. Like, there's a bunch of stuff here I'm interested in. You might retarget them later and see like, where do people respond to more? Do they respond to travel? If we know they're already interested in frugal living, we've retargeting them. After they've raised their hand and say that's what they're interested in, what really drives them? Is it traveling when they retire? Is it retirement planning? Like, what else drives them? I love to be able to answer those questions. I'm trying to think 10 or 12 steps ahead of how I'll reach an audience, but how I will continually ask questions and be able to get answers to them. Because if I don't do that on the front end, something that makes me crazy is when I have a question later and I can't answer it. Like 2 months down the road. And it's funny, every client I've ever had has always asked me a question I couldn't answer at some point, so you'd think I'd just get used to it. And some of them are ridiculous. But a lot of times I think to myself, I should be able to answer that. You should know the answer to that question. And structure, I've said this before on these calls, I think all success, I think, comes down to structure. So when you structure your endeavor in a way that it can answer questions for you later, the good questions like, if somebody's interested in X, what's the next thing that they're most interested in? If they're interested in frugal living, is it frugal living so they can travel, frugal living so they don't have to worry about living with their children, frugal living, like what really drives them?
My thought on frugal living is it's retirement, and they're wanting to live within their means and not run out of money. That's my first thought, but yeah, we'd have to test it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. An interesting thing happens when you can. I use a narrative format, so I will ask a question and then answer it with data, but the data becomes part of the narrative. And we tend to write that up in narrative form because as story-loving creatures, we all understand narratives. But when you look back on 6 months or so of data, if you just look at data, it's pretty mind-numbing. You're like, wait a minute, what? And this was a test, and what was it? And when you write it out as a narrative, you just do a kind of a paragraph at a time. This market, whatever. This was the audience that we sent, and this was the message, and this was the response, and then we did X, and after X, Y happened, and then after that happened, we did X, a different X, and and then you start adding what you think it means, and it's interesting. You get this beautiful narrative about a business, so that a year later, somebody says, "Oh, have you ever thought about doing whatever?" You say, "Well, we know our audience," and then you just start talking. And it's funny because I've had opportunities where I've worked with clients who've told me a narrative. And I may have used this example before. I had this client where they spent $500,000 to do focus group testing. Big number, like lots of participants. And they found their market. I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it was 22 to 27-year-old women, college educated, urban, who were interested in women's empowerment. So things like Planned Parenthood, and there's just a whole list of ways we could find an audience. And that was this company's market. And they knew it, and and the narrative was beautiful. I mean, they really had it, and their site spoke to that audience very well. And that when this was an interesting client, we did 979 different ad groups. It was crazy. It was crazy to keep track of it all. And what we found is that the most responsive ad group, by far, in every factor but one, was that group. No surprise. Only thing they never bought. And I mean, never bought. Their page depth, bounce rate, phenomenally low. Page depth, off the charts. Time on site, it was like they were doing term paper research. They just loved the content and did not spend a dime. So
the content was enough.
It is. What it did is it closed the loop for them.
Oh.
It was intellectually satisfying. They didn't need to buy the product to be part of the tribe. They could just share content. They could like them. They could do all kinds of things, and they could get the little serotonin squirt that said, "Hey, feel good," a little dopamine, feel good. I feel great. I showed my friends that I like this company, and my friends like it too. And I read this article, and they make such great points. And it's beautiful, except nobody was paying the freight. And what was interesting is they did have enough customers over time that we reached out to 1,150 customers, 600 of whom replied, which was amazing. 600 replied, filled out a survey. 60 did phone interviews, fairly extensive, and we compiled all of the data. And their actual customers were not opposite, but in many ways opposite. They were all married, not single. Single was the first criteria for the other one. It was stunning. It was a stunning experience to say, okay, well, the narrative was perfectly accurate all the way to the spending money part, which, this is not a social movement, it's a business. So it all made sense, but it did not change buying behavior. The buyers were not who they were speaking to, and the buyers felt slighted. And little things like package sizing and stuff. All these things didn't speak to the buyers. And once they did, once they made offers for buyers, really dramatic things happened. It was interesting. It's an interesting idea. So I like this idea of really listening. It's not my idea. It's straight out of Lean and other things, but to really listen to what you're being told. And that doesn't have to be one-on-one with a prospect or a client. It can be in data. If you have an audience of 25,000 people and you show a message to and all you hear are crickets, you've been given some information. you now know something, and you should codify that. Like, this approach and this message to this audience did not work at all. Okay, so now second order thinking. And now what? And then what? Okay, great. So that didn't work. So we're going to try a different message to the same audience. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, and then what? You have to keep doing that. Then you'll find one like, well, and it's funny, I'm in the middle of a project where I can't make things work to save my life. We have a client where I cannot make it work. It's the strangest thing. We started with straight to offer. Straight to offer didn't work. I'm like, okay. And I said right at the beginning, straight to offer, not going to work. So I was so smart, so smart. My strategy was going to be so much better. My strategy we executed not quite the way I imagined it, so I had a little wiggle room. Didn't work. I'm like, well, of course it didn't work because it wasn't done the way I'm so smart and my way was going to work. So then the client let me do it my way. And guess what? My way did not work at all either. Like, my way executed exactly as I imagined it. Didn't work. And it, we went through sort of 4 or 5 iterations of my way, all the way to, this was an opt-in to VSL format. We eventually got to the point where the VSL was embedded on the page with no opt-in, with a strategy session appearing in a minute instead of 10 minutes, and still hearing crickets. So we have like inexpensive, highly targeted, great traffic that really resonates with the message, and that is it. And now we're back to straight to offer, like testing straight to offer a different way. But we know it's, I guess it was Henry Ford who said something. No, Tom Edison who said, like, he knew 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. I'm starting to feel like Edison a little bit. I'm like, well, I know 1,000 ways for this business not to work on Facebook, which is not fun after a while. Like, you have to see a ray of hope occasionally. But still, having that narrative and having that knowledge, these messages really resonate with the audience. It's really important, like, to know, like, the audience is really responding to this. But once they've responded, they're not taking that next step. So why is that? Like, what, we don't know, but that's at least gives us a place to start. There's a lot of times what will happen is people say, well, you just need better traffic. I'm like, well, this is good traffic. This is really good. Very responsive, very engaged, but not taking the action. So what does that mean? I don't know. We're crafting that narrative. So there's a lot of art to the work that we do that has so much science in it, which is, I think E. Cummings is always the beautiful answer who asks a more beautiful question. A lot of times you just have to figure out, like, you're tired of asking questions when the questions aren't, how can we fit all this money into this wheelbarrow? That's a fun question to ask, but if there's no money and no wheelbarrow, it's not so much fun to keep asking a bunch of questions. All right, so I've been listening to my own voice for too long. I'm going to tell you the question I heard this week that I thought was really, really amazing. I'm also going to credit who asked it, just to be clear. And then we'll open up if there's anything else specifically I can answer for either of you two, and if not, we'll get out of Dodge here. So here's the question. This is Richard Koch. He is if you've ever done any reading about the 80-20 principle, Koch has sort of made he sold how many millions of copies of books about the 80-20 principle. He's the first person that I'm aware of who, as an author, he's a business person too. He gets referred to as a fractional billionaire, which I think is such a ridiculous term. He's worth like $400 million. Just say he's worth $400 million, and a fractional billionaire. But Koch is, I think, the first person who said, if mathematically speaking, the 80-20 principle is sort of a force of nature. It shows up in very funny ways. It's fractal. It scales within itself. It shows up in crazy numbers in very odd ways. What if we took that principle and applied it to our lives, knowing that the math isn't going to be right? I don't know that he comes out and says that, but that's been a revelation for me. It's very true. At the individual level, math of 80-20 does not hold water. the principle does that a minority of what we do creates a majority of the effect. Little cause, lots of effect. So there are a few things that you do or that you experience that overwhelmingly drive your negative emotions. If you're driving traffic, that's a great one. A few relationships that we have as individuals that produce the majority of our joy. There are a few relationships we have that produce the majority of our angst. So there is an inequality between cause and effect. I think we can just kind of accept that as a principle. The math isn't going to be perfect. It's not generally going to be math, but inequality between cause and effect, I think we can all wrap our head around. So Kosh did a in-person 3-day or I think 3-day seminar for Perry Marshall. A few years ago, came over. People paid a lot of money to go. Apparently the first day, this is like an 8-hour day in a seminar. First day, Kosh spoke for an hour, closed his laptop and was done. Not sure you want to be the presenter at that event. You're like, oh, we've got this fractional billionaire and whatever. But I mean, the reality with a guy like Richard Koch is he's making a point when he's doing that. Yes, you had me for 8 hours, but I'm the 80-20 guy, so I'm not going to talk to you for 8 hours. I mean, it would be crazy. He could never do that. So here's his question. I heard this from this was a Perry Marshall webinar this week. I wasn't on at the event. I think it's an interesting question. So the question is, what would you have to change about your business to maintain or increase profits while working only an hour a day? And the person who shared this question, I think his story, I think, is interesting. His reaction was very negative. It's like explosively negative. Like, this is the stupidest thing I've heard. I have to do this. I have to do that. I can't. What do you mean an hour a day? And of course. But I've done this exercise now twice, where I've sort of asked him, like, I've sat down with a piece of paper and I've said, all right, if I truly, for a health reason, for whatever reason, if I truly had an hour a day that I could focus on my business, and I couldn't give up clients, I couldn't decrease my service levels. I mean, I had to get it done and make sure everybody was really happy. What would I have to change? And it's been a very interesting experience to realize that I actually know a lot of the answers. Now, will I have the courage to act on them? That's a different conversation, very different conversation. But the answers, you'll find them. If you do it a few times, you allow yourself to just. And what I found helpful was that I didn't make any commitments to it. I didn't have this sense of, once I figure this out, I'm just going to, then I can just work an hour a day. I like what I do. I don't love the thought of, I don't know what I would do if if I didn't work. I enjoy what I do. It's a big source of satisfaction for me. So there was a little bit of angst, like, what I imagine. So that's not the point. The point is to figure out the really high value stuff that you should be doing. You can do other stuff for the other 7, 8, 10, whatever hours. But when you ask yourself this question, I'll just reiterate it so you have it. What would you have to change about your business to maintain or increase profits while working only an hour a day? I think I would probably add, what would you have to change about your business and yourself to maintain or increase profits while working only an hour a day? I know for me, one of the things I would have to change about myself is I would have to be comfortable not having my hand in everything. I've run this business for a long time. It's very personal to me. I care about my clients very deeply. I consider myself their fiduciary. I take very seriously their well-being. If I had an hour a day to devote to this, personally, I would have to be more willing to trust other people to have my level of caring and commitment. And that's a big change. I don't know that I would probably have to overcome the belief that employees probably would not be as motivated to do that as I would as a business owner. So, there's a lot I would have to change about myself, not just my business. But it's been a wonderful exercise what's been interesting about it is I didn't try to do anything action associated with it, yet I've pulled out a bunch of actions. I've actually very strangely just done some stuff where I'm like, you know what? and I hear myself, like, as I do it, I'm like, if I only had an hour a day, would I really be sitting here messing around with Google Tag Manager and doing it? No, I would not. So somebody else is going to do this. Like, this is not, like, I want it to be in place. I don't need to place it. You know, it's, I don't know, something to do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a good question. I mean, that's a place eventually I want to get to, is where I'm not required for the business to run. You know, it can run without me. And that's, you know, all of that. You have to have systems in place. You have to trust the systems. You have to trust people. You know, it's big. Yeah.
The thing that I did that has been helping me, it's hard. I have the document open, and because it's open and it takes up a quarter of my 2 screens, I will use it. But I made a running log of everything that I do, just a document. I didn't try to use a time tracker or anything else. And I really don't put time in unless it's a lot of time, like over half an hour. But I just and I'm honest. And it's not beautiful all the time. But today I chewed up a half an hour of angst about the fact that I had booked a flight next week with Travelocity, and then had to go in and pay a bunch of money extra to get seats that weren't going to make me want to kill myself on the plane. And it's like half an hour. Half an hour of my life I can't get back. That if you asked me to do like, hey, how do you spend your professional time? I would not have allocated, any time whatsoever for the foolishness of plane travel and flying out to a client. Now, from a value standpoint, if I'm in a middle seat flying to Los Angeles, I'm going to be miserable. So it's very valuable. I'm glad that I did it, but it's still something that I did today that needs to show up somewhere. I need to be aware of it. Needed to get done. Now, in the future, am I going to have a VA from India do that for me? No, I'm not. I mean, do I need to have somebody else do my own travel? No. But I do need to be aware of that's one of the things that can take up some of my time is if I'm going to meet a client and I need to do the travel, there's probably a couple of hours that I have to devote to getting all the travel arrangements made. That's reality. Okay. Now, the 80-20 purists are going to come back and say, well, what a waste of time, and it's $10 an hour work. And come on. Who cares? But where I do think it's interesting is when you look, and I don't know the answer to this, but after a couple of weeks, I'm only going to do it for 2 weeks, a week or two. But after a couple of weeks, I want to look back, and I think I'm going to print, I've had this thought, I think I'm going to print out, I like to interact with the physical artifact, so I think I'm going to print out about 10 copies of this list and have different color highlighters and look for things thematically. Like red highlighter is like sheer stupidity or something. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Or I might come at it a different way where it's, I don't know, but to be able to look at the information and say, when I put these at a distance, this 3, 5, 10 pages, whatever, there's a lot of blue or purple or whatever. And I know purple means X. Maybe X is a type of activity. Like I write, I enjoy writing. Maybe I'm going to look at that and see that, wow, I do a lot of writing. Well, that's good to know, because I enjoy writing. And that might tell me that I'm sort of on the right track. Or I might look and see no writing in my professional life. Wait a minute, I love to write. Why don't I write? I think this is just an interest. I've tried to do this a million different ways. And this is the first one that's been successful, where I just, no commitment, just keep a list. Just whatever I did. I've done some stupid stuff. Like it's not embarrassing, and then I'm like, I wouldn't want somebody to look at it and be like, you did what? And it's like, but what it ends up being is a third of my day was reacting to my inbox with requests from clients who are, one of them, I had a bunch of time with a client who's been my longest running client, who's been a client every week for 17 years. And I'm very responsive to their stuff. And I'm doing stuff that I should not be doing. It was stupid. Somebody else should do it. Somebody else could do it much better than I can. And it was almost like a little bit of surprise from the person who was saying stuff like, wow, this is great. Thanks for taking care of it so quickly. What he really meant was thank you specifically for taking care of this so quickly, because you're not usually this responsive. Usually people on your team are way more responsive. So it was kind of funny in that sense that, I don't know. But I think there's value. I mean, as entrepreneurs, I think if you take the judgment out of what you're doing, because where the judgment comes in is you say, oh, hey, Melanie, you're doing 80% of the thing, of the work that you're doing is low value. Well, guess what? That work needs to be done. So it's not low value. It's getting done. Later, you probably shouldn't devote your time and attention to it. But right now, it needs to get done. So you just can't allow yourself to have any judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. I've tried to hire folks to do some stuff, and if it's hard to get people that'll do stuff at the level that you would.
Right.
So I end up taking it back and doing it anyway. So, and I think that's a problem with all businesses getting started is having the systems in place to hire the right people that can really do what you can trust that they'll do. So you don't have to do that. That is tough. It really is.
There's a good program out there. It's called Agency Savvy. I think it's agencysavvy.com. Mike Rhodes, I think is how he pronounces his name. He runs an AdWords agency in Australia. He's pretty well known in the AdWords community. His AdWords training is top notch. He's been at it forever. Probably one of a handful of people who really get AdWords in the real world. But Agency Savvy has a lot of stuff out of eMyth, from Dan Sullivan, Strategic Coach, some system theory, some work the system stuff.
Ultimate Sales Machine. That's what I'm reading now.
I think there's probably some of that in there. Built to Sell. It's all very similar messaging. Something that Mike put together, which it's funny. I watched the module on it, and by about 80% of the way through, I was ready to return the whole training. So you know what, this is not right. I'm wasting my time here. So I have a director of operations, and I was sort of scanning through it to make sure that it was going to, I needed him to be able to take it and run with it. And then, I don't know why necessarily, but right at the end, how he said something and how he put together this thinking, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm over here at this level, and he's at this entirely different level. But the model is basically what he calls 10-80-10. I think he confuses. We're getting back to 80-20 here. I think he has confused a few of the elements of 80-20 in this. And his point is a good one. But basically 10-80-10 is that a project, and this is really Dan Sullivan's thinking, that someone's adapted, but a project is 100%. And if we as entrepreneurs and executives try to do all 100%, it doesn't get done. It's just not going to get done. So what we have to figure out is what's the 10% on the front end of planning, the initial kickoff stuff. What is that critical 10% that we do? And then a service provider, most likely, or an employee or somebody, will do the middle 80%. It's not the mistake that people make is they're like, oh, that's the low value 80%. It's not low value. It's just the doing of the work is the middle 80, more than chunk of the 80%. And then at the other end is this other 10% of the executive's time where you look at the work that the other person did and give them some feedback and some mentoring. And was this what I asked for? Is this what I had in mind? Here's how you could do it better. So at that level, it's all right, that's good as an entrepreneur. As a business owner to think, and I've done this, and I've found it very helpful to say, what's the 10% of the highest level of thinking I need to do here to unlock the doing of the 80%? I like that.
I like that too. That's nice.
Where it gets,
and then at the end, you put it all back together and polish it up.
Yeah, and at the end, you give people some feedback. But where it gets interesting too, though, is because 80-20 as a concept is fractal, meaning within itself it repeats. So, Mike's approach to this is he says, okay, within the 80%, so I'll use an example from my company. I will often conceptualize the overall strategy we're going to take for a client. I'm the best person to do it. I just have that repertoire of thinking. So I will do that thinking, and I will and I will go to, if it's Facebook, I'll go to Zoe and I'll say, here's what the client's trying to accomplish. Here are the limitations. Here's what we have to work with. Here's what I think, here's what success looks like. Here's how we're going to measure success. Maybe it's cost per lead, maybe it's ROI, whatever it is, a few different factors. But ultimately the goal is, like, we have a client where they have a free plus shipping book offer. So it's like, oh, the goal is to sell books. No, the goal is to get people in seats at an event, but that's not really the goal either. The goal is the program that's sold at the event. That's the goal, right? So I articulate all of that to Zoe. Zoe then has 80% of the doing, but her 80% has a 10-80-10 component too. So there's a 10% on the front of her work where she sits down and takes everything I've told her and conceptually builds what the work needs to look like, and what the doing looks like, and then how she's going to check it at the other end, at the other 10%, how she's going to make sure that she did it the way she imagined it, and did everything work out correctly. And within her 80% of the work, there's another 10-80-10. There's it keeps going. And where this becomes really valuable, and where I think it's worth really the price of the program, I think by itself, is that we think, like, to scale a business, there are a couple of different strategies. One of which is you just add another body, right? Excuse me. I'm in like body adding stage. So I'm like, okay, we have more work than we can handle in this particular part of our business. So I need to bring on somebody who does like what the work that the asset who's in that side of the business does. But I don't really need, I don't need a full-time person there yet. So now I can debate it. But if somebody does this detailed analysis, they can figure out that, well, within the, from my perspective, within the 80% of the doing, their 80% of the doing has lots of stuff they could hand off to somebody else that's lower value. And when you figure that out and you can pull one or two out, you can say, you know what, maybe at the tactical level, I don't need to do find the creative, the imagery, and whatever. Or for Zoe's case, Zoe puts all of the strategy into a Google document for clients to see, and it's formatted beautifully, whatever, and she's very attentive to detail. Well, she may decide, you know what, I don't need to do the formatting. My job is the content. Like, I need to get the content in there, and we have a designer who works for us. Maybe that designer pulls a slice of Zoe's work out and says, oh, I love the design work. I can make what you created look beautiful. Well, that's perfect. Now we're continually refining what everybody does, which is a really beautiful model because it nests. And it's allowed us to pull some things out so that oftentimes the work that people don't like, they can hand to somebody who does. And it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. I like the program. It's a program where you don't necessarily feel like, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I've never thought of this, but it's oftentimes I find that things I know intellectually, and it's reflected in behavior. And I can map this to behavior, or it gets me thinking about it in a way that allows me to get to behavior. So definitely something I recommend. Unless it doesn't apply to your business in particular. But that 10 model I like. I think if you search for Dan Sullivan, strategic coach, I think he calls it like the 80-20 model. His thing is figure out the part that you do that matters, and then kick the project to the next person to get it done. Like, do your work, your top crucial stuff, and get it out of your plate so you won't keep trying to get to perfection. Because we as entrepreneurs can't seem to live with 80% complete or 80% good, that we want it perfect. And what's that expression? Perfect is the enemy of good. So yeah, I'm
done. Perfect is the enemy of done.
Exactly. But Todd talks about this a lot. Get the worst day your funnel is going to have is the first day, before any optimization. So why not get there as fast as possible? It makes a tremendous amount of sense. Conceptually, there's some really interesting thinking out there if you go digging around. It's just, the thinking matters when you can apply it. cool question is a cool question, but a cool question that you answer and get an insight that you make a behavioral change because of is a really cool question. If the change is positive, if the behavioral change is more Facebook. Probably not great. Probably not a great change.
Oh, I went to Facebook to get a pixel today, and I ended up wasting 30 minutes going through. I got distracted. It was like, oh, man.
It's designed to distract you. It's frightening. We get surprised. The thing I love about Facebook is it distracts us. And then we're surprised that we got so distracted when it's specifically everything about it is set up to distract us. Like,
yeah.
All right. Well, are there any questions that I can answer? I will get an email back to you. It'll be tomorrow morning with specific answers.
Okay.
Is there anything specific I can answer for you or Mike? I know Mike's running around there. He's hiding. He's probably still got that head injury. So, anything general to the business? Or anything question? I appreciate that both of you showed up.
Just putting soup on the stove.
Now, Mike, are you going to MFA Live?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Are you bringing the family? Just you?
Monique was thinking about coming, but she doesn't know if she has to work or not. There might be a contract she has to oversee at that time. So, yeah, so we don't know about that yet.
Good times. Don't hit your head before then. All right, I'm going to do it going once, going twice here. I appreciate that both of you were here for the call and entertaining and entertained, I hope. So we'll dive back in. Actually, I won't see you, Melanie. I'll be communicating with you by email, probably Skype. I'll see you, Mike, before I see you on MTAM again. So it'll be fun. I'm really 5'2" in real life, so when you meet me, like, what? That little guy? It's not quite true. 6'2", but close.
Close.
Excellent. Thank you both for your participation, and see you soon.
Thank you.
See you, Sean.
Bye,
Thanks, Sean.
everybody. Bye,
See you.
Mike.